When 9/11 happened in September of 2001, Jonathan J. Hopkins was a brand new graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point. Out of a class of 933 that spring at West Point, Mr. Hopkins was fourth. Overall, fourth out of 933. He received the Knox Award, which is given to the cadet with the highest rated military efficiency in the entire class. As a newly minted Army officer, Jonathan Hopkins deployed into combat at the start of the Iraq War. When a 4,000-soldier Army brigade went into Kirkuk at the start of the war, Hopkins' platoon, the platoon he led, was one of the first. 10 days later, he was the lead element of his battalion in a vehicular assault on Kirkuk. Over the next several years, Jonathan Hopkins would rise to the rank of captain and serve 3 combat deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He became commander of a Stryker infantry company. He earned 3 Bronze Stars, one with Valor. Yesterday, now former U.S. Army Captain Jonathan J. Hopkins was fired because regardless of all that I just said about him, our country now officially rejects his service and wants him out of the military because of don't ask, don't tell. Joining us now is Jonathan Hopkins, discharged yesterday from the United States Army. Mr. Hopkins, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel.
I know that you received your discharge orders yesterday. How long did the overall process of separating you from the military take under Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
It took almost exactly 14 months from the time they first started the investigation until I left the Army, during which I continued to work day-to-day business just as I had before.
So over those 14 months, I mean, you were still in the Army for a long time while this process was unfolding. Were there negative incidents, negative reaction of any kind amongst your fellow soldiers once that process started?
Really, no. My experiences with my chain of command and my bosses and the peers that I worked directly with was really actually quite outstanding. They're professional. We worked in a element of mutual respect, which is exactly as it existed before I was outed about 14 months ago. I've talked to people that used to be in my infantry company, some of whom may have assumed that I was gay beforehand because there's not too many unmarried captains and commanders in the Army. And even them, they assumed that when I was in the unit that maybe he's gay, but he's a good commander is exactly what they've said. And so that didn't really matter because what mattered is he took care of us. He trained us for combat. He worked well with all of us. So that's fundamentally what it came down to.
I understand that you didn't voluntarily come out, that somebody else outed you to the Army without asking you to get into any details that you don't want to get into. Is that basically the situation?
That's basically the situation, except for if I take you back 14 months, my battalion commander brought me in. It was the same day that it was announced that I was on promotion to major a year early, which only a small minority of the Army receives. At the same time, he said, but also you're under investigation for being gay. It really kind of exemplifies the paradox here that some of the people the Army judges to be among the best also might be taken out by this policy that isn't based on your performance, but instead on how you were born. So when he informed me of that, I talked to my chaplain for a couple hours just to make sure I was making the right choice, and I walked back into his office and I told him what the truth was, because I came to the conclusion that I'd lived a government-mandated lie to cover up who I was, to actually have to fib a bit so that I wasn't ever telling anybody that I was gay. And that lie really just had to come to an end. It was time to just be honest. That's what we're dedicated to from the time we entered West Point all through our military career. Duty, honor, country, or the Army values of honor, integrity, they matter. And I thought that applied here.
How much did you think about the prospect of the policy being changed? The prospect that if you just held on long enough, the policy might be changed and you might be okay to stay in without lying?
I know that I and even some of my friends who I also know who are gay have thought a lot about it. It's really just kind of like a survivor mentality to a point. I mean, you're focused mostly on your job, but this is a constant, severe distraction. It causes you to be paranoid, etc. And so during that time, you're just hoping you can make it to a situation that nobody's going to find a reason to want to out you, or somebody might not find out accidentally, and that you can just make it until the policy changes, which everybody seems to assume is going to happen in the next year or two.
Are you angry? I mean, after giving the Army more than 10 years of your life, after West Point, after 3 combat tours, I mean, to find yourself a civilian for the first time today, do you feel mad?
I don't think that's the right emotion. I mean, the bottom line is I love the Army. I've always loved the Army, or else I wouldn't have spent 9 years depriving myself of the ability to have happy personal relationships with others and a reasonably successful personal life and just focused professionally. Because I loved what I was doing, I thought the people I did that work with were incredible. So the Army is just a bunch of people. It's 530,000 people, most of which I enjoy serving with. So I can't be mad at the Army, although this whole process has gone through its times of devastation initially, a bit of anger and bitterness for a brief period of time, and that's best gotten over, and then going through a period of sadness that, yes, I'm getting out, and a degree of understanding and trying to learn from this period of adversity, because given the experience and the negative aspects of this experience, the only thing that can be gotten from it is to learn and to grow. What is next for you? After this, I'm heading out to Georgetown here in just a few days to study national security policy for a master's degree in that. I expect that, I mean, this whole issue with me leaving the military has kind of left its mark as well. So certainly I'm going to do what I can to help change the policy, help people see the light that judging people based on their performance is what has always mattered in the military, whether we're overturning segregation or integration of women, or with this issue. That's what matters to keeping soldiers alive. So serving in whatever capacity I can to help along with that, whether it's working with groups like Nights Out or OutServe, a newly formed one that has quite some potential to have impact. That's something that I hope to be involved in, because we all care about trying to do the right thing by the soldiers in our military. Captain Jonathan Hopkins fired from the U.S. Army under Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy as of yesterday. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your service. Have a good night, Rachel. At this point, I'm sure in certain quarters in Washington, we are being discussed as unseemly for interviewing people whose military careers the commander-in-chief is currently, right now, ending, despite all his professed urgency to the contrary. I look forward eagerly to the complaints. There's more to come ahead.